Hey guys, welcome to my video. So, I wanted to talk about the main character of Sacred Shadows and Latent Light. His name's Elliot Fleming. And when the book starts, it starts in at the end of his sophomore spring. And so it takes about a year to get to the final scenes. So he's a sophomore and he's never really been tested in his life. He had just kind of a regular growing up and stuff, but he's a pretty smart kid, which actually creates a problem for him because he doesn't know what he's capable of. A little backstory that you learn in the first third of the book. He, in high school, his real only experience of kind of extending him outside of his friend group or his interest group was meeting a girl, and she ended up leading him on, kind of just toying with him. And whereas to us adults, we know, like, okay, you'll get over it, kid. But when he's in the middle of that, it was a minor traumatic experience for him, at least because he hadn't been tested with a lot of things. Intellectually, he was okay. He was smart and stuff. But anyway, out of that, he actually goes to the library, the local library, to get a copy of whatever book that girl and the guy she was actually kind of two-timing him with, what he thought they would never read. And he actually ends up grabbing a copy of Aristotle. And he only gets like 20 or 30% of it the first time he reads it, but he gets something. We meet him now in college, and he's kind of this like quiet kid. He doesn't extend himself too much, but at the same time, there's a lot going in there. It opens up, he's in one of the final philosophy classes, and he's kind of in his head countering some of the ideas that the teacher, Smith Ingman, one of my other characters, I mean, he's just trying to teach like his philosophies, Kennedy liberal, give different perspectives and stuff. He's just trying to be a teacher. But meanwhile, Elliot, the main character, is like, here's how I can counter it and go against it and stuff. So there's this separation between the life that's on the outside of Elliot and his kind of antagonism to it and mild cynicism, but also there's a power in him, an energy in him, because he's at the cusp of the beginning of his life, and he wants to use it in a certain way. And that's the thing that Ryder Colson, the Shakespeare professor, who's going to put on this Shakespeare play of Henry IV, Part 1 and Part 2, that's what he sees. Like, this kid has more going on inside him, because he's also Elliot's Shakespeare professor. Elliot gets tripped up by both of these professors, but for different reasons. Ingman, he thinks, is trying to quash him and trying to, like, he's always trying to beat Ingman. But Ryder, it's like, I want to beat him to see if I can get at his level. Now, Elliot doesn't know this. He just is kind of pissy in classrooms. But Ryder Colson, he sees it, and he's like, hey, kid, if you mean any of these stuff, if you really want to learn what you're trying to fight, you'll join my Shakespeare play. And he kind of dares him to it. I mean, in private meetings, Ryder talks about Elliot in the first scenes, about how like he'd make the perfect Henry because there's more going on behind the surface than even he knows. And he's, for heaven's sakes, he's the only student who's ever read Aristotle on his own. And so anyway, so that's the situation around Elliot. He's kind of dared by this one professor to join his Shakespeare play, and he's caught between wanting to think about it cynically and think like, oh, well, I don't need to prove myself, but then also knowing he really does. All right, he needs to go outside of his Aristotle, which he's not really He learns what it means to really read Aristotle and to understand him, that you can't just read him and then use him as a tool to beat everybody. It's like, no, you need to actually use his reason to be vulnerable and to live your life, not just logically understand everything, because even that is cutting off a part of we meet soon, which is probably bad phrasing there, but he's consistently distracted. I mean, he's a young heterosexual guy, and he's easily distracted. From that first scene with Ingman, he's like kind of debating in his head with the professor. It's during this one girl, Cora Madison, she's giving her final presentation, and she's kind of actually arguing with the professor. Meanwhile, Elliot is off to the side, just like, here's how I would counter. And he kind of speaks up for her, and then that gets her. She starts talking to him, and then he gets attracted to this very beautiful African-American woman who gives him attention. And he's kind of trepidatious because, as I said, his background conflict is he's been hurt. Now we know, okay, you'll get over it, kid. But he's still in the middle of it. He's still carrying that. And in fact, it was out. And this is something that Ryder Colson sees, is that out of this thing, rather than just like sitting and being sad, he went and he took a hard book that you would never expect someone, definitely a high schooler, to read on their own. And he used this experience, this difficult experience, what was for him a difficult experience of like having all this expectation about this girl and this crush, and then having it be flattened. He took that crucible and integrated a very difficult writer into himself. That's what Ryder sees, and that's also what this other character Cora sees, which I'll give another spot about her, that they see like this kid has more going on in his head, and it's interesting and attractive, at least to Cora. We'll discuss that in another video. Anyway, Elliot is this mix of, he's weak, but he's really not. He just doesn't know how far he can shoot. Like, he doesn't know how far his energy can take him, and that makes him kind of afraid of it. And Ryder Colson takes it, and he's like, hey, let me teach you explicit. You've already done this implicitly. You're already using, and this is one of the themes of the book, is using a difficult situation, overcoming it by integrating a difficult writer or a difficult perspective and testing yourself, because apparently he gets hurt too easily. So he's like, I want to survive the next time that this happens, which, I mean, Cora shows up, it's going to be the next time that happens. And so that's why he's like trepidatious, but also like, maybe I have grown. And anyway, he wants to become bigger than he was so that he won't get hurt. He wants to grow, but at the same time, he wants to test how real are my perceptions. Like, I was misled. How do I understand that? And then he integrates Aristotle into him. All the professor sees is this kid has more going on in his head, and I want to show him how he can use that. I want to mentor that out of him to make it explicit. I want to show him that he doesn't just need to be the Henry in the tavern. He can also be King Henry later on. Elliot is in the middle of that. It's all implicit in him, and he doesn't name it to himself that this is why he read Aristotle so that he could survive, he could overcome later on, and he's still in the place of like wanting to triumph over that girl who's probably forgotten him, which he's trying to forget her. But that's where we meet Elliot, and through the book he gets tested and how it becomes explicit. Ryder tries to make it explicit that not only can books and the difficult writers of the past and present help us to manage difficult situations in our life, dare I say tragic moments in our life, which that says more about Ryder than Elliot, but his loss is infinitely greater than Elliot's, which you'll learn later. But he tries to make that explicit, and not only can books help us over difficult situations, but also books are the difficult situations. They are a crucible of controlled chaos whereby we can test, okay, well, what am I? How much of me is real, and how much of it works, that even if you completely disagree with the book, you will know that, hey, I read Nietzsche, or I read Dostoevsky, or I read Toni Morrison, and I let it cut deeply, and that is kind of what shows us what we are, and it helps us construct what we are. Each of the characters, I say in my intro video, that each of the characters their conflict is built around a specific book. And so Elliot's at the beginning is Aristotle, but he's not as Aristotelian as you would think. He uses it more as a defense rather than as a tool and as something to really take pleasure in, which I think is better, more what Aristotle is about. Although, I mean, I have his bust right behind me, so I'm a fan. But that's what's significant about Elliot. He took the philosopher and integrated him into himself, and that's what Ryder sees that, and he's like, well, there's something going on here. I want to doctor that out of him without being his parent or anything. In fact, part of it is, I'm going to remove the parental protection from you, Elliot, so you have to learn to stand on your own. And then, yeah, we'll see what Elliot does with that. Anyway, thanks for listening. Okay, a little bit good stuff about the main character. Most of the people who have read the book or who are reading the book, they're annoyed by him, and that's good, okay? Because he's not just a simple, hey, like my protagonist. He has a lot of problems, but there's also complexity there, and trying to get him to grow out of it and learn to stand on his own 2 feet. Anyway, talk to you guys later. Thanks a lot.